Welcome back. This is Chris, my brother in Christ, Stephen.
Welcome back.
All right, we're going to try a marathon today, and we're going to preach out of Revelation. Date today is January 22nd, year of our Savior 2023. And the title of this video is going to be called Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter... Is it chapter 8 or chapter 7?
Believe it's chapter 8. Yeah.
Chapter 8. Okay.
Chapter 8. Chapter 8.
All righty. Revelation chapter 8. Okay. So we left off on chapter 7. So continuing, remember that the book of Revelation is the continuation of the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel became sealed, right? It was dealing with the four empires and that stone kingdom.
And the Revelation 8 is discussing the seventh seal. So
Seventh seal.
A little bit of
Yes, that's probably what it was. It threw me off. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Okay, so continuing here, getting organized here.
You have the seventh seal, the seven trumpets. That's all in chapter 8. You'd think that'd be in chapter 7.
Yeah. So that takes us the little parenthetical, because chapter 7 was like a parenthesis. It was a small insertion there. Little parenthetical 7th chapter of Revelation. When we have gone into chapter 8, we have returned back into the historical preview. How about Revelation chapter 8, 1 through 4? Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 through 4.
And when it opened the seventh seal, there was a silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with prayers of all the saints, and upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand.
Amen. So in the tabernacle in the wilderness, and in the temple in Jerusalem, you had out in the court of the temple the brass altar. We see that where the sacrifices were burned. But then the Holy of Holies, there was the golden altar upon which incense, not sacrifices, but incense was burned. So if we look at the setup, well, Israel was out in the wilderness. This was the layout. Can they see that, Stephen?
Yep.
All right. You notice that Levi is in the center. That's where the animal sacrifices were happening. That's where the Holy of Holies was, where God would come over and place himself in a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, I believe. But in then the Holy of Holies is with the golden altar upon which incense, not sacrifices, were burned. Thus you have here the same thing. The golden altar, which was before the throne, and again, pure Israel symbolism right straight through. Though when the seventh seal was opened, it's getting into a pretty solemn situation. And there is silent consideration of this thing for about a half an hour before any of these things start to happen. Well, that'd be kind of eerie, or just like nothing's happening for about 30 minutes. It's like...
That'd make everybody go,
The quiet before the storm type of thing. It's like, what's going on?
It's like when a baby starts screaming, and you hear that silent, that silent right before.
You're like, oh, here it comes.
Here it comes.
Then you see the seven angels give each his trumpet, and this other angel who is offering up incense and the prayers of the saints. Then it goes on in verse 5. What do we see in verse 5?
And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake.
Interesting. All right, so here is, Stephen, can they see that? This is the just a reference there of the seven trumpets?
Down just a little bit. Yeah, right there.
Okay, all right. So I'll come in a little bit, and then I can...
Up a little bit.
Up a little bit?
Yeah, right there.
All right, great. Now let's kind of move over a little bit so you can see it. And if you want to stop, you can see that. Now, this is the start of something even more serious in the way of trouble than what you had out of the first 6 seals. This is leading up to something big. The voices and thunderings and the lightnings, of course, are the battle against what's coming, and the earthquake, a great shakeup of earthly institutions. We see Revelation chapter 8, verse 6. What does verse
And the
6 say?
7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound.
Right. So you see, you're going now from the mere opening of a seal to the 7 new stages, each of which is brought on by the blowing of a trumpet. What about verse 7 of Revelation chapter 8?
It's interesting that it says the first angel sounded, the second angel sounded, because that's what Jesus did when he spoke. He spoke things into existence. It's by verbal, by frequency.
Frequency, yes, yes.
The first angel sounded his frequency, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up.
So you remember that among the plagues brought upon Egypt, when Moses was trying to do a little salesmanship job with Pharaoh, it included hail mingled with fire, and it was destructive. It destroyed the crops of the Egyptians. Hence, here you have again one of God's plagues coming upon the ungodly. What does the third part of the trees was burned up and all the green grass was burned up, verse 7 mean? Well, now the fall of the Roman Empire was in thirds. Separate, we see separate historical periods occupying the separate thirds of the empire. The western third took West Germany, Gaul and Italy, Spain and Carthage in North Africa. The southeastern third took in North Africa, generally Egypt, Palestine, and Syria. And the northeastern third took in Asia Minor and the Balkans. Therefore, the 3/3 of the Roman Empire were dealt with. Remember that Israel is God's battle axe and weapons of war. Remember that the Iron Kingdom, the 4 great pagan Babylonian succession of empires. Let me get this up again. Stephen, can they see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. During this time, the Stone Kingdom was set up. Stone Kingdom is Israel. You know, God's battle axe and weapons of war. That is Israel. Now, if we can see right here, here's a map of the third parts of the Roman Empire, conquered by the Goths, the Arabs, and the Turks. Stephen, can they see that?
Yes.
All right. So remember that the Roman Empire, the Iron Kingdom, is being broken up. Remember that Revelation is symbolic, right? And that symbolism is based upon Old Testament Israel or Hebrew symbolism to understand. That's why we have to understand the Old Testament along with the New Testament. It is one complete Christian book. So continuing, of course, the start of the empire was with the city of Rome, and naturally it came to its judgment before the easterly part, with its capital at Constantinople. First, the Franks, who were a mixture of 7 Germanic tribes of Israel, overran all of Gaul. Remember, Gaul is what? Gaul is Spain. No, Gaul is France, correction. And then Spain. In Spain, they seized ships in the ports and spread all over the Mediterranean shores, scattering their power in little colonies here and there, too small to do anything substantial. They only kept their power closely organized really in Gaul, which is France. That's where you get the word Galatians from, based upon the word Gaul. Gaul is France. I know they don't teach you this in seminary, ladies and gentlemen. They don't teach you this in church. Now, nevertheless, while they didn't become a force in the Mediterranean itself, they did emphasize the weakening of the Roman fleets, which were unable to stop it. Then when the German tribe of Alemannia overran northern Italy in 272 AD, another group of Germanic tribes, the Suevi and the Alemannia, the Vandals, that's where you get vandalism from. That's where Rome never really forgave, but that was a tribe of Israelites that came in and they broke everything. That's where you get the word vandalism from. Remember that God, Israel, is I think it's in Jeremiah 51 something, 51:20 maybe. But Israel is God's battle axe and weapons of war, and He's going to break in kingdoms and nations. And that's what he's doing here. He's breaking up the Roman imperial empire. He's breaking this up. Now remember, during this time, the book of Daniel, this is Daniel where it was a sealed book. Remember Daniel's sealed book? And then who unsealed it in the New Testament? Jesus Christ. So we're getting revelation of Jesus Christ continuing. Go ahead, my brother.
Great call, bro. Jeremiah 51:20, right on time. Thou art my battle axe and weapons of war, for with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms. And with thee will I break in pieces the horse and his rider, and with thee will I break in pieces the chariot and his rider. And it goes on and on. It says, with thee I will break in pieces man and woman, and these I will break in pieces old and young. I will break thee, will I break in pieces the young man and the maid. I mean the shepherd, the flock, they'll break in pieces the husband, the yoke,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Well,
looks sound like he's breaking the flies, breaking the wings off the flies. I mean, he's tearing everything up.
So prepare for a lot of breaking up. We're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about. Oh, this is history, ladies and gentlemen. This is history.
Wow.
You can find it, and here's one book, History of Nations. History of Nations. This is volume 4 under Italy. Yeah, this discusses a lot of this stuff, but I know they don't teach you this in the seminary today, but this is very open. This is a history of Italy. What's going on here, ladies and gentlemen? Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of breaking up. God is remembered. See, Rome did a lot of evil to the world. Did a lot of evil, and now their chickens have come home to roost. So continuing here.
The Inquisition was all Catholic.
Yeah, well, that's the deadly wound rehealed. That's papal Rome, but we're talking about pagan Rome right now. So here we see, where am I?
The second angel sounded, Revelation 8:8.
All right, so we see the start of the Roman Empire with the city. We see the breaking up in Spain. We talked about the Vandals, right? The Vandals and the Alans invaded northern Italy, all the way down to Florence in 406 AD. They retreated back to Gaul and into Spain. The Alans were the first to be driven westward before the invasion of the Huns. Excuse me. Thus you can see here the Alans coming ahead of any of the others were moving into the Roman Empire. Some of the Visigoths under Alaric besieged Rome in 406 AD and were bought off with a big ransom. They took it in 409 AD. And it was of so little consequence that Alaric, instead of calling himself emperor, now merely appointed one of his officers emperor. Then in 410 AD, Alaric captured it again and allowed his troops 6 days to plunder in the city. Now, what's interesting, I believe this is true, is if they were in the Christian churches, Alaric says, you will not mess with anybody, defile anybody in the churches. You go and do your thing, but don't mess with people in the churches. Now, if you think the things happening to Rome were rough on it, they were. But remember how many cities Rome had plundered and looted in the past centuries. Mm-hmm. Chickens come home to roost, and Rome was reaping a fair harvest of the crops she had sowed. The successor of Alaric, Adolf, led the Visigoths out to South Gaul, that's France, and into Spain, where they set up the Visigothic kingdom. That was the dominant one in Spain until they were overcome by the Moorish invasion in 711 AD. The Suevi, the Alans, and the Vandals, and the Burgundians moved on out again, crossed through Spain, and settled in southern Spain. From there, the Vandals under Genseric crossed to Africa, or specifically to Carthage, in 420 AD. And immediately commenced building themselves a powerful fleet. Rome could not do a thing about it. And 5 years later, 434 AD, the emperor formally ceded North Africa to the Vandals, and there Genseric built up an enormous navy. He just took over the whole Mediterranean Sea. That was what he did. He harassed even the coasts of Italy and Greece. And 450 AD, a Vandal fleet sailed up the Tiber River, captured and pillaged Rome. With 14 days of looting, the Suevi, under their king Ricimer, also pillaged Rome in 470 AD. And the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire was deposed in 476 AD. I think that was Ottiser. That's the end of the pagan Roman Empire. And remember, that deadly wound was healed, and that's where you get Papal Rome commencing right around 606 AD. But you notice Ottiser just went, Odoacer, I think is his name. He just goes, he didn't even kill him. He just deposed the last Roman Empire, and he just went, just go home. It was so pathetic. He just went, just go home. He just sent him home after he conquered him. Didn't even kill him. So we see after that there never was an emperor in Italy anymore. You will now remember this, says the third part of the trees and the green grasses burn up. Now these Israel tribes had an awful lot to avenge, and they did it thoroughly. They really devastated the land when they went through. That was one of the bitter complaints of the conquered about them, that in the course of the siege they cut down trees and all that kind of thing. Well, they left a fairly devastated land when they were through, but that was their job. Who was supposed to break the Babylonian succession of kingdoms? Who was to do that, right? Who is to break these up? Who's to break up the beast system? Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greek, and Rome. Who's to break them up except what Stephen just read in Jeremiah 51, verses 20 and 21? Thou art my battle axe and weapons of war. For with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms, and with thee will I break in pieces the horse and his rider, and with thee will I break in pieces the chariot and his rider. Reminds me of Exodus 15, verse 3.
Well, the Red Sea, because he broke the chariots apart.
Yeah, he messed the Egyptians up pretty good, didn't he? Yeah, isn't Exodus 15:3, isn't he a man of war? So continuing, nations and powerful armies, all this would not stand against them. See also Daniel 2, verse 44. Daniel 2:44. During these pagan empires, what do we see? During the first beast, second beast, third beast, and fourth beast, which I think came from the water, Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greek, and the Roman, Imperial Rome, which is getting broken up by Israel right now. What was set up in Daniel 2, verse 44?
And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
So it's standing forever, means it's here right now. Standing forever. It's going to break these kingdoms up. So in a third part of the empire, you had this devastation and the destruction of the western part of the Roman Empire. Then we come to the second trumpet, Revelation 8, verses 8 and 9. Revelation 8, verses 8 and 9.
And the second angel sounded as if it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood. And a third part of the creatures which were in the sea that had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed.
Now here again, you remember that one of the plagues visited upon Egypt was that the water of the river Nile and the water in the wells and cisterns turned to blood. Hence, here you can see consistent Israel symbolism going on in the last book of the Bible. The same as the second book of Exodus of the Bible. The Vandals under Genseric really took over the sea. You may be sure of that. They destroyed the Western Roman navy. They laid waste to the peninsula of Greece and Dalmatia, which is in the eastern shore of the Adriatic Sea. They even threatened Constantinople. Genseric went there and threatened to besiege Constantinople. He didn't make any very serious attempt at the siege, and it wouldn't have done much good if he had, because he didn't know siege warfare. But anyway, the Emperor Zeno in Constantinople had to make a treaty of peace with him, respecting his authority over most of the Mediterranean Sea. This was in 476 AD. Therefore, the third part of the sea became blood. The third part of the ships were destroyed. Constantinople maintained a big and important navy, but they just about had to keep it in port to keep it from being destroyed. Then you come to the third trumpet in Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 and 11.
And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as if it were a lamp. And it fell on a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of the waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And a third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter.
Amen. The Greek word of wormwood means a plant both bitter and deleterious. Thank you. Deleterious. In growing in desolate places, figuratively suggestive of a calamity and injustice. So from a plant called wormwood, they get a highly poisonous substance called absinthe, and a drink is made of this absinthe. It acts somewhat like LSD and produces all sorts of wild hallucinations, and like LSD, if you use too much of it...
Is it like absinthe?
Absinthe, yeah.
Absinthe is a liquor that is very, very, very potent.
Very potent.
Yeah. You talk about spirits. Yeah.
It can do very serious and permanent brain damage, right?
Yeah.
This is all about, mixing plants and this and this. What is this which took over a third part of the rivers and fountains of the waters? The Huns occupied the valleys of the Danube, the Rhine, and the Po. About 200 BC, the Huns, who were mongrel nomads, settled on the steppes of Central Asia and overran the Chinese emperor, and for a time held it and ruled it. But it was too soft living, and their power weakened in the next century, and it became evident that they were not going to be able to hold the Chinese empire in subjection. So they migrated onto the steppes near the Caspian Sea. So remember that the third parts of the Roman Empire were conquered. Third part, third part, and third part. Right here, ladies and gentlemen. So the Huns are a part of this as well. So, continuing, after settling there a while, they were too numerous for that area to take care of their flocks and herds, so they separated.
Absinthe is an anise-flavored spirit derived from several plants, including the leaves and flowers of Artemisia absinthium, or the grand wormwood.
Wormwood. Interesting.
Together with green anise, sweet fennel, and other medicinal and culinary herbs, historically described as a highly alcoholic spirit, typically 90 to 148 proof.
How would they know how to do that?
That's you got.
That's the fallen angels telling people how to cut the roots and this plant, and this plant, and this plant.
It's derived from several plants, including flowers and the leaves of the absinthe together. It's just unbelievable, and it is called wormwood.
Interesting.
Wow.
So after settling there a while, they were too numerous for that area to take care of their flocks and herds. So they separated. One group went southward through Scythia, which had previously been vacated by the Israel tribes. Now, one thing may puzzle you a bit. If you read the works of various historians written over a period of many centuries, you don't stop to realize that changes take place in the course of centuries. There are a few of the later historians who talk about the Scythians as a very low type of Mongol people, but it was the Huns who were in Scythia long after all Israel tribes had migrated out into Europe. Hence, it seems to be a case of mix-up on the part of the historians as to what the Scythians were like during the period of the Israelite occupation of Scythia and the later Mongols occupying that same area. For the Israelites were Caucasian men like ourselves. These Huns did not occupy this area until all the Israel people were gone. The other group of Huns went on to the basin of the Volga River, and settled there for a considerable time. In the latter 300s AD, they drove out the tribe of the Alans, who had lived between Volga and Don rivers. And you remember that in the 400s, you had the Alans invading Italy, along with several of the other Germanic tribes. Thus, they took over the space the Alans had occupied between the Volga and Don rivers. Then they pushed on west later, driving the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths westward, before them to the Danube River, and you first pick up the Goths entering the Roman Empire when they moved in and took over most of the Danube Valley. Rome tried in vain to hold it, but the Roman armies were just smashed. And so Rome ceded to the Visigoths quite a territory in the Danube Valley on condition they would stay there and give up their warfare. They made it part of the treaty that the Goths were to lay down their arms. So, of course, anytime a people is disarmed, invariably, the same thing happens. The Romans didn't respect their word at all. They badly mistreated the Goths, of course. In those days, it didn't take much of a forge to produce weapons of war. So, once again, oh, well, just hand over your guns. Oh, government's going to take care of you. You remember what happens when all the people under communism or socialism or feminism or fascism or whatever you want to call it in the 20th century handed over their guns? The government turned on him and murdered over 100 million people. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Made Hitler look like a choir boy in comparison. So that's what happens. So you didn't need a big $150 billion factory to turn them out. Any blacksmith with a bit of iron and an anvil could turn out as a good sword the next fellow had. Thus you find the Goths then pushed forward by the Huns, behind them moving on into the home of the Roman empires in the 400s AD. This is all the 400s AD. Remember, the final destruction of Papal Rome Pagan Rome was about 476 AD. This is about the destruction of the Iron Kingdom, but it will be reborn. God bless you. We'll pick it up in the next video. Thank you. Bye.